Audiobook Top, your new home for the finest selection of audiobooks available anywhere.
I am no bird and no net ensnares me. Imagine, if you will, these words spoken not by a queen, not by a celebrated orator, but by a governess. A woman whose life has, to all outward appearances, been nothing but a series of ensnarements. Orphaned, impoverished, plain of face, and with no influential connections to her name. What audacious fire, what fierce, indomitable spirit, must reside within such a soul to utter a declaration so absolute, so defiant, in an age that demanded female submission above all else? This, my friends, is the voice of Jane Eyre. A name that, perhaps, suggests nothing extraordinary. Yet, her story is anything but. From the cold, unfeeling charity of Gateshead to the austere, often brutal discipline of Lowood institution, Jane's existence has been dictated by the wills of others. She has been taught to be submissive, to know her place, to quell the restless stirrings of her own mind and heart. But her spirit, oh, her spirit refused to be caged. How, then, does this solitary, unsponsored woman, with no beauty or fortune to commend her, rise from the very bottom of society's ladder to stand on what she perceives as equal footing with a man of immense wealth, a master of a grand estate, a formidable, brooding enigma like Mr. Edward Rochester? How does she not only claim equality but demand it, insist upon it, even when the world conspires to hold her down with the invisible threads of class, gender, and circumstance? This, my dear listener, is the central, burning question at the heart of our tale, the journey we are about to embark upon. As Jane steps into the shadowed, ancient halls of Thornfield Hall, she carries with her not just the heavy burdens of her past, but a burgeoning sense of self that will be tested beyond the limits of imagination. For Thornfield is not merely a house, it is a fortress of secrets, a labyrinth of whispers and unexplained phenomena. The laughter that echoes through its passages is not always joyful. The footsteps heard above are not always those of the living. There is a presence, a chilling, volatile force lurking in the hidden chambers of that vast, crumbling house, a presence that threatens to unravel not only Jane's burgeoning happiness but her very sanity. A madwoman, they say, locked away, yet her spirit pervades every stone, every shadow, a constant, terrifying question mark hanging over the destiny of all within. This is the journey of a woman who defies convention, who seeks passion and purpose amidst the strict textures of Victorian society. A woman who, against all odds, against all expectation, declares her freedom in a voice that echoes through time. Come, let us delve into the depths of her extraordinary autobiography and discover how a bird, trapped for so long, finally learns to take flight. Welcome, dear listener, to a journey not merely through pages, but into the very soul of a woman who defied an era. This is Intro and Narrator's POV: the orphan who refused to bow. Imagine, if you will, the mid-19th century, a world of gaslight and rigid social hierarchies, where the whispers of polite society held more sway than the roar of a cannon. It was an age often romanticized, yet for women, it was frequently a gilded cage, its bars forged from expectation and enforced by the iron hand of decorum. Daughters were trained for marriage, wives for subservience, and any woman who dared to possess an independent thought, let alone voice it, risked ostracism, or worse, ridicule. Her ambition was to be charming, her intellect a gentle ornament, never a weapon or a tool for self-determination. It was into this suffocating atmosphere that a remarkable voice emerged, one that dared to challenge these very strictures, not with a public declaration or a fiery sermon, but with the quiet, unyielding power of a novel. Yet the author, a clergyman's daughter named Charlotte Brontë, understood the profound limitations of her time. To be taken seriously, to have her revolutionary story heard without the immediate prejudice accorded to a female writer, she adopted a shield, a masculine pseudonym, Bell. Under this guise, she gifted the world a character who would forever shatter the mold of Victorian womanhood: Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre, a penniless, plain orphan, a governess with no connections and fewer prospects, was everything the Victorian ideal of woman was not meant to be. She was not beautiful. She was not meek. She was not docile. From the very first breath of her narrative, Jane asserts her right to feel, to think, to judge, and crucially, to refuse. She refuses to accept injustice. She refuses to be silenced. She refuses to be bought. And most profoundly, she refuses to bow. This refusal, this quiet, unwavering assertion of self in a world determined to diminish her, makes her a figure of radicalism far beyond the political reformers of her day. Her revolution was deeply personal, fought within the confines of her own conscience, and against the relentless external pressures to conform. For me, Jane Eyre has been more than just a story. She has been a guide, a silent mentor on the arduous path to self-respect. In a world that so often seeks to define our worth by our appearance, our possessions, or our perceived status, Jane Eyre teaches us the profound importance of inner integrity. She shows us that true dignity comes not from external validation, but from an unwavering fidelity to one's own moral compass, to one's own sense of justice and worth. She reminds us that our value is inherent, not conferred, that we deserve respect simply by virtue of our existence, regardless of our station or our fortunes. Jane's journey is a testament to the fact that to be fully human is to honor one's own spirit, even when that spirit is bruised, battered, and utterly alone. Her refusal to compromise her beliefs, her demand for intellectual and emotional equality, her quiet rebellion against societal expectations, these are not just the actions of a fictional character. They are a blueprint for living a life of authenticity and self-worth, a timeless lesson in what it truly means to look within and find an unbreakable strength. She teaches us that to hold one's head high, not in arrogance, but in the quiet confidence of one's own truth, is the ultimate act of defiance and self-love. It is a lesson I return to again and again, for Jane Eyre, the orphan who refused to bow, continues to light the way for all who seek to claim their own voice and their own unbreakable spirit. Chapter 1, Gateshead and the Red Room. Welcome, dear listener, to the stark, unyielding world of Gateshead Hall, the unwilling crucible of Jane Eyre's earliest and most formative years. Here in the grand, yet joyless domain of her aunt, Mrs. Reed, we find our young protagonist, a mere 10-year-old, grappling with a profound sense of isolation and injustice that would forever scar her spirit. From the very beginning, Jane was an outsider, an orphan tolerated grudgingly, subjected to the whims and cruelties of her wealthy cousins. Her existence was a perpetual gray, overshadowed by the vibrant, often vicious, colors of the Reed children, and chief among her tormentors was John Reed. A hulking boy of 14, John embodied the arbitrary power that held Jane captive. He was a bully of the most insidious kind, finding sport in her vulnerability. He would strike her without provocation, destroy her books, or, as we witness in a pivotal moment, hurl a heavy volume at her, not out of passion, but out of a cold, entitled contempt for her very presence. The deep injustice lay not just in his actions, but in the unwavering blindness of the adults around them. Jane, the victim, was invariably painted as the aggressor, the naughty one, while John's malicious acts were dismissed as boyish exuberance. This constant gaslighting, this relentless denial of her reality, cultivated a searing resentment within her small chest. But there is a breaking point for every spirit, even one as downtrodden as Jane's. Pushed to her absolute limit by John's latest assault and the subsequent condemnation from the servants, something within Jane Eyre snapped. It was not a calculated act of defiance, but an explosion of raw, untamed fury. She fought back, striking John, not with malice, but with the desperate, primal energy of a cornered animal. This was her first true act of rebellion, a necessary, almost involuntary, surge of self-preservation. It was a refusal to be utterly consumed by her oppressors, a nascent declaration that her spirit, however small, would not be entirely extinguished. It was a spark, small but fiercely burning, that signaled the beginning of her journey towards self-worth. Naturally, such an outburst was met with swift and disproportionate punishment. Jane was dragged, screaming and struggling, to the most dreaded place in Gateshead, the Red Room. The very name hung heavy with an ominous chill. This was not merely a spare chamber, it was a mausoleum, the very room where her kind uncle, Mr. Reed, had died 9 years prior. As the heavy oak door creaked shut, plunging her into a terrifying solitude, the room became a sensory assault. The air itself felt thick and cold, heavy with a silent history. Crimson was everywhere, the oppressive curtains, draped like funeral shrouds. The vast, imposing bed with its lofty head, shrouded in scarlet, seemed to brood in the dim light. The high-backed chairs, upholstered in the same deep crimson, stood like disapproving sentinels, their polished mahogany surfaces reflecting her small, terrified figure in distorted, fleeting glimpses. The only light filtered feebly through the window, barely illuminating the huge wardrobe and the dressing table, casting long, unsettling shadows that danced with every beat of her hammering heart. The silence was profound, broken only by the frantic thrumming within her own ears and the occasional creak of old timber, which, in her heightened state of terror, seemed to whisper of unseen presences. The room was meticulously clean, yet held a pervasive scent of disuse, of old wood and confinement. But it was the psychological terror that truly overwhelmed her. Left alone in the room of the dead, her childish imagination, already overwrought by injustice and fear, conjured the spectral image of her uncle, Mr. Reed, whose kindly spirit, she had been told, lingered there. His presence, whether real or imagined, merged with the chilling reality of her abandonment, solidifying her trauma. The cold seemed to seep not just into her bones, but into her very soul, a physical manifestation of the emotional neglect and isolation she endured. This harrowing night in the Red Room, an act of punitive confinement meant to break her will, instead forged something within Jane. The injustice of her punishment, piled atop the constant bullying, crystallized her understanding of a world that was profoundly unfair. And that wild, furious outburst against John Reed, though it led to such torment, was not a failing. It was the vital, desperate act of a young soul refusing to be utterly crushed, a defiant cry in the face of absolute tyranny, laying the groundwork for the remarkable resilience that would define Jane Eyre. Chapter 2, Lowood School. The architecture of hypocrisy. Welcome back to the stark, unforgiving world of Jane Eyre, as we delve deeper into the chilling confines of Lowood School. Here, beneath the guise of Christian charity, we witness an architecture of hypocrisy meticulously designed and brutally enforced by its superintendent, Mr. Brocklehurst. It is a system where piety is weaponized, and the tender spirits of young girls are systematically starved, both physically and emotionally. The suffering at Lowood was a daily gnawing reality. Imagine the children, their faces pale and thin, their small bodies shivering in threadbare dresses, even in the bitterest winter. Their meals were a mockery of sustenance: burnt porridge, watery gruel, or occasionally, a meager slice of bread, often too stale to swallow easily. Hunger was a constant companion, a dull ache in their bellies that overshadowed lessons, dreams, and even play. Their very existence was a testament to deprivation, a silent scream of neglect. Then cast your mind to Mr. Brocklehurst himself. Picture him a man of formidable stature, his broadcloth coat of the finest quality, his shoes gleaming, his corpulent form a testament to abundant feasts and rich living. His complexion was ruddy, his voice booming with self-righteous conviction, and his every appearance at Lowood was a parade of stark, horrifying contrast. He preached humility, self-denial, and the mortification of the flesh, yet his own life was a blatant contradiction, a luxurious affront to the very principles he so vehemently espoused for his charges. His sermons on spiritual grace and the dangers of earthly vanity rang hollow in the cold, cavernous dining hall, while the girls shivered, their stomachs empty, their gazes drawn to the comfortable warmth of his presence and the unctuous glow of his prosperity. This was not merely negligence, it was a deliberate, pseudo-religious cruelty, cloaked in the sanctity of divine will. It was against this backdrop of institutionalized suffering that Jane Eyre found herself brutally exposed. The infamous scene, etched forever in her memory and ours, unfolded during one of Brocklehurst's inspection tours. Having been branded as a liar by Mrs. Reed, Jane's reputation preceded her. When Brocklehurst learned of Miss Temple's compassionate attempt to provide the girls with a more palatable breakfast, his indignation reached a fever pitch. He seized upon Jane, singling her out from the trembling rows of pupils, demanding that she stand upon a stool in the middle of the room. There, before the entire school, before her teachers, and before the scrutinizing eyes of Mr. Brocklehurst, she was subjected to an excruciating public shaming. He declared her a liar, a deceiver, and an outcast, forbidding anyone to speak to her for the rest of the day. The weight of his condemnation, the burning shame of being isolated and branded, pressed down upon her, threatening to crush her young spirit. It was a moment of profound injustice, a theatrical display of divine judgment orchestrated by a man utterly devoid of true compassion, using the very notion of God's omnipresent eye as a weapon of terror and control. This public humiliation, like the persistent hunger and cold, was all part of Brocklehurst's twisted philosophy, the mortification of the flesh. He genuinely believed, or at least professed to believe, that by denying children comfort, food, and warmth, by actively making them suffer, he was purifying their souls, stripping them of worldly vanity, and preparing them for a spiritual existence. He ordered the girls' naturally beautiful hair to be cut short, condemning long locks as symbols of pride. He insisted on thin clothing in the dead of winter, reasoning that hardiness was a virtue, and that physical discomfort brought one closer to God. This doctrine was applied to every aspect of their lives: their inadequate food, the freezing dormitories, the lack of proper medical care, and the relentless emotional oppression. The horrific irony, of course, was that while he enforced this harsh asceticism upon vulnerable children, he himself indulged in every creature comfort. The resulting deprivations led not to spiritual enlightenment, but to chronic illness, despair, and, tragically, to untimely deaths amongst the students, particularly during the typhus epidemic. Brocklehurst's Lowood was not a school of Christian charity, but a monument to a chilling and destructive hypocrisy, where faith was twisted into an instrument of profound cruelty. Chapter 3. Helen Burns' The Doctrine of Endurance. Welcome back to our journey through the life of Jane Eyre. In this third chapter, we delve deeper into the corridors of Lowood, where the austere walls barely contain the vibrant spirit of our young protagonist, Jane. Here, she encounters a soul unlike any other she has known. Helen Burns. Their relationship is not merely one of friendship, but a profound philosophical encounter, a crucible where Jane's fiery sense of justice collides with Helen's serene, almost ethereal, doctrine of endurance. It is a clash between the immediate, passionate cry for fairness and the patient, spiritual embrace of suffering. The stark contrast between them was never more vivid than in the infamous hair-cutting scene. Miss Scatcherd, a teacher whose every gesture dripped with petty cruelty, singled out Helen for perceived slovenliness. Jane watched, a knot of indignant fury tightening in her stomach, as Miss Scatcherd seized Helen's beautiful long hair, accusing her of untidiness. Then, with a harsh snip, she mutilated the flowing locks, hacking them short, a public humiliation meant to break Helen's spirit. But Helen? She stood motionless, her eyes downcast, not a tear, not a flicker of resentment disturbing the tranquil surface of her expression. To Jane, such passive acceptance was incomprehensible, an almost alien response to such blatant injustice. Where was the fight? Where was the burning desire for vindication? This stoicism, Jane soon learned, was no mere timidity, it was the bedrock of Helen's profound philosophy. Helen believed in universal salvation, in a benevolent God who saw beyond earthly faults and welcomed all souls with infinite love and mercy. Why resent Miss Scatcherd, she would gently explain to a fuming Jane, when one could forgive her, when one could understand her flaws and offer compassion. To Helen, enduring suffering, turning the other cheek, was not weakness but strength, a path to spiritual purity, and a testament to an unshakable faith that transcended the temporal pains of the world. Earthly vengeance, she argued, was futile, a distraction from the ultimate promise of divine justice and eternal bliss. For Jane, who yearned for immediate retribution, this was a perplexing, almost maddening concept, a quiet surrender to tyranny that her passionate nature instinctively rebelled against. But even Helen's profound endurance could not withstand the ravages of consumption. As her health waned, her spirit seemed to glow with an even purer light. Jane, risking severe punishment, stole away in the dead of night to be with her dying friend. In that quiet infirmary, under the pale moonlight, Helen lay serene, speaking of her approaching death not with fear, but with joyful anticipation, a homecoming. "I am going home," she whispered, "where there is no suffering, no pain, and where I shall see God." Her belief in universal salvation, in a loving Father, was absolute, comforting her utterly. Jane, clutching her hand, felt a profound grief, yet also a bewildering awe at such serene certainty. Helen's unwavering faith, even in demise, both shook and soothed Jane. It didn't erase Jane's fire for justice, but Helen's peaceful departure planted a seed of profound reflection. It revealed a power beyond earthly rebellion, a strength in spiritual resignation, and a hope transcending bitter realities. Helen's death was not just the end of a friendship, it was the beginning of Jane's lifelong wrestling with faith, justice, and the true meaning of endurance. Chapter 4. The governess. A new servitude. The journey from Lowood, a new chapter unfurling before me, had brimmed with the promise of change. I had sought a life beyond its confines, a stage where my mind, so long confined to the acquisition of knowledge, might at last exercise its faculties. And indeed, a new position I had found, as governess to a young French girl at Thornfield Hall. Yet, even in this new freedom, a subtle dissatisfaction began to bloom, a quiet discontent that whispered of horizons still distant, of an intellect yearning for more than mere instruction. I would pace the third-story corridor, a long, wide space, on evenings when the rain lashed against the panes and the very air outside seemed to weep. My spirit, though no longer crushed by the brutal regimen of Lowood, felt itself chafing against a different sort of confinement, that of expectation, of idleness. And it was then, in those solitary moments, that a truth, long latent, solidified within me, a conviction that resonated with the very core of my being. It is in vain to say human beings ought to be content with tranquility, I would think, my gaze lost in the stormy twilight beyond the glass. They must have action, and they will make it if they cannot find it. Millions are condemned to a stiller doom than mine, and millions are in silent revolt against their lot. Women are supposed to be very calm generally, but women feel just as men feel. They need exercise for their faculties, and a field for their efforts, as much as their brothers do. They suffer from too rigid a restraint, too absolute a stagnation, precisely as men would suffer, and it is narrow-minded in their more privileged fellow creatures to say that they ought to confine themselves to making puddings and knitting stockings, to playing on the piano and embroidering bags. It is thoughtless to condemn them, or laugh at them, if they seek to do more or learn more than custom has pronounced necessary for their sex. This was not merely thought, it was a silent, fervent declaration, a burgeoning testament to a soul that refused to be stifled, that craved expansion, experience, life in its fullest, most vibrant expression. Thornfield Hall itself rose before me, a structure of imposing age, its battlements dark against the gray sky, promising secrets within its stone walls. The journey had been long, the landscape growing ever wilder, and the first sight of the house stirred a mixture of awe and apprehension within my breast. It was a place steeped in history, a place that seemed to breathe with a life of its own. I was met not by the master, but by Mrs. Fairfax, the housekeeper, a kind, elderly lady with a gentle voice and an air of quiet efficiency. She was an unexpected balm after the austere journey, her welcome warm and reassuring, but even her comforting presence could not entirely dispel the subtle currents of strangeness that seemed to permeate the very air of Thornfield. The house was immense, a labyrinth of quiet corridors and echoing rooms, often silent save for the occasional rustle of unseen drapery or the far-off sigh of the wind. Yet, there were other sounds, too faint and elusive, a peculiar, high-pitched laugh that sometimes seemed to drift from the upper stories, chillingly disembodied, then vanishing as swiftly as it came. It was nothing definable, nothing concrete, merely an unsettling whisper at the edge of hearing, contributing to an atmosphere both grand and strangely unsettling, hinting at presences unseen, at mysteries yet to unfold. My role was clear, to instruct Mademoiselle Adele Varens in English and other suitable accomplishments. I was a governess, a position that, while a significant step above my former station at Lowood, carried with it its own peculiar brand of isolation. I was not a member of the family, nor was I one of the servants in the strictest sense. I dined with Mrs. Fairfax, sharing pleasant conversation, but there was an invisible line, a barrier of class and circumstance that set me apart. I had arrived at Thornfield an educated woman, perhaps more so than many of my peers, thanks to Miss Temple's devoted tutelage. Yet, my education, though a source of personal strength and intellectual freedom, did little to alter my fundamental social standing. I was a dependent, a paid employee, occupying a solitary niche in the vast, quiet household. This was a new servitude, indeed, one not of physical deprivation, but of social estrangement. I possessed the mind of a free woman, the spirit of an independent soul, yet my outward life remained circumscribed by the expectations and hierarchies of the era. Thornfield, for all its grandeur, became a gilded cage, offering comfort but not true liberty, a new horizon that, while broadened, still left my spirit yearning for genuine flight. Chapter 5. The Jitrash meeting Rochester. The crisp winter air, typically a balm to the soul, held an unusual tension that day. I had ventured further than usual from Thornfield, relishing the solitude of the snow-dusted lanes, when a sudden, unfamiliar sound shattered the serenity, a distinct clatter of hooves, growing rapidly closer. My gaze swept the horizon, and what I saw initially seemed to defy belief, rooted as it was in the superstitions whispered by the villagers. A creature, dark and immense, with a powerful dog-like head and fiery eyes, seemed to gallop towards me, bearing a spectral rider. My heart gave a strange lurch. Could this be the fabled Jitrash, come to herald ill tidings? But as it drew nearer, the phantom dissolved into reality, a magnificent Newfoundland accompanying a powerful horse, upon whose back sat a man of dark aspect, his form indistinct in the afternoon twilight. Then calamity. The lane, deceptively coated in thin ice, betrayed them. The horse, struggling, slid violently. There was a sickening thud as the beast went down, throwing its rider with jarring force. My initial shock gave way to an immediate, practical response. Here was no spectral harbinger, but a man in distress, alone. I approached cautiously, my heart now beating with a different urgency. He lay half prostrate, his leg caught beneath the horse, which thrashed momentarily before settling with a groan. The dog, too, sat whining, distressed. "Are you hurt, sir?" I inquired, my voice surprisingly steady. He struggled to sit up, a grimace distorting his already stern features. his dark eyes, keen and piercing, immediately fixed upon me, scrutinizing me with an intensity that felt both intrusive and utterly direct. He was perhaps 35, rather plain, even rugged in appearance, certainly not handsome by conventional standards, with a heavy brow and a wide, firm mouth. Yet, there was an undeniable force, an almost animal magnetism to him. "A sprain, I think," he grunted, attempting to free himself. "Damn the ice! And who the deuce are you, little sprite?" This was a man unaccustomed to either deference or delicacy. His language was blunt, his manner imperious, even in his predicament. Yet I found myself not shrinking, but meeting his gaze directly. "I am Jane Eyre, sir. A governess at Thornfield Hall." "A governess," he repeated, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "And what are you doing wandering these desolate wastes alone?" "I was merely taking my afternoon walk, sir," I replied, my tone as composed as his was brusque. He regarded me then, not with a superficial glance, but with a profound, assessing scrutiny, as if weighing my very essence. He accepted my proffered arm, leaning heavily upon me, his substantial weight a surprising burden. The reversal of roles was Stark, the powerful master, temporarily vulnerable, reliant upon the physical aid of his humble, young employee. It was a tableau quite unthinkable within society's strictures, yet here, on this desolate lane, it felt utterly natural. We managed to free the horse, and he, gritting his teeth against the pain in his ankle, hoisted himself back into the saddle. He then handed me a whip and a card. "Here, take this to the hall, and tell them I require a groom and a surgeon. You may keep the card, little governess, and thank you. You have a steady hand." He rode off, leaving me standing alone, the winter air suddenly colder. No romantic tremor had passed between us, no blush had risen from a sudden, undeniable attraction. Instead, there was a keen intellectual curiosity, a profound sense of having met someone utterly unconventional, someone whose mind, though glimpsed for mere moments, promised a depth and complexity that intrigued me profoundly. I had not found him handsome, no, but compelling, undeniably. Little did I yet know this dark, dismounted rider was the very master of Thornfield, Mr. Edward Fairfax Rochester. The jitrash had, in its own way, indeed heralded a significant arrival. Chapter 6. Fire in the night air, usually a bomb, pressed heavy and still against Thornfield Hall. I remember settling into the quiet comfort of my small room, the last embers of the day's tasks fading with the lamp. Sleep, when it came, was a profound and dreamless descent, a welcome oblivion after the day's often strenuous lessons with Adele. Yet, even in that deep slumber, a subtle intrusion began to prick at my senses. It was faint at first, like the ghost of a distant bonfire carried on a fickle breeze, a mere wisp that my mind dismissed as fancy, but it grew, gathering substance, thickening in the air until it was no longer ignorable. A smell, not the pleasant scent of wood smoke from a hearth, but something sharper, more acrid, unmistakable in its warning: smoke. My eyes snapped open, a sudden and cold clarity chasing away the last vestiges of sleep. The room was dark, but the smell was now undeniable, a dry, choking presence. My heart began to thud, a frantic drum against my ribs. I scrambled from my bed, my bare feet finding the cold floor. The instinct was immediate, urgent: investigate. It was not a time for hesitation. My hand found the doorknob, turning it with silent precision. The corridor was a tunnel of deeper shadow, but the smell here was stronger, leading me, compelling me forward. It led me to the third story, to the very door of Mr. Rochester's room. A faint, dancing flicker of light was visible beneath the gap in his door. It was enough. Terror, cold and sharp, pierced through me, but it was quickly overshadowed by a fierce surge of determination. I pounded on the door, calling his name, my voice a strained whisper, desperate not to alarm the sleeping household, yet desperate to raise him. No answer. The smoke grew thicker, the crackling within more distinct. Without further thought, I turned the handle. The sight that greeted me was one that would be forever burned into my memory. The great bed, with its hangings, was ablaze. Flames, vivid and hungry, licked around the curtains, already beginning to devour the quilt beneath which Mr. Rochester lay in a stupor, completely oblivious to the inferno consuming his chamber. His face, visible through the swirling smoke, was unnervingly peaceful, a stark contrast to the destruction unfolding around him. There was no time to think, only to act. My mind, despite the horror, remained remarkably clear. Water. I snatched the ewer from his washstand, its weight a sudden strain on my arms, and dashed the cold liquid over the blazing hangings. The flames hissed, recoiled, but did not surrender. Again and again, I refilled the ewer, soaking the mattress, the bedclothes, beating at the embers with my hands when the water ran out, until at last, with a final defiant sputter, the last flame died, leaving behind only smoldering fabric and a room thick with acrid smoke. It was then that I turned to him, still lying senseless amidst the dampened ruin. I shook his shoulder, harder this time, calling his name with more force. His eyes, when they finally fluttered open, were cloudy with sleep and confusion, his features disoriented in the dim, smoke-filled room. He looked at the charred bed, then at me, as if struggling to reconcile the reality before him. "What is it?" he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. "Are you hurt, sir?" I asked, my voice still trembling slightly, a cold dread clinging to me despite the fire's defeat. He sat up, pushing himself back against the headboard, his gaze sweeping over the ravaged bed, the wet, blackened curtains, and finally resting on me. A profound comprehension slowly dawned in his eyes, chasing away the last vestiges of slumber. His face, usually so guarded, was stripped bare, revealing a raw astonishment, an almost childlike vulnerability. "You have saved my life," he said, the words not a mere statement, but a deeply felt confession. His voice was low, resonant, imbued with a strange, intense energy that vibrated through the silence. It was not the simple gratitude one offers a servant for a task performed. It was something far more profound, an acknowledgement of a bond forged in the crucible of near death. He reached out a hand, not to touch, but as if to grasp the very air around me, his eyes never leaving mine. There was a directness, an almost possessive warmth in his gaze that I had never encountered before, a quality that stirred a curious, unsettling warmth deep within me. "Who did this?" he demanded suddenly, his voice hardening, his eyes flashing with a renewed suspicion that had nothing to do with me. Yet, when he looked at me again, the intensity returned, overshadowing even his anger. He asked me questions, rapid fire, about my awakening, my actions, examining my every word, as if searching for an answer beyond the literal, trying to fathom the depth of my courage, the unexpected grace of my presence in his moment of peril. "I must be dreaming," he murmured, more to himself than to me, "or else you are a spirit. Who are you, little girl, who comes to my rescue in the dead of night?" There was a profound wonder in his tone, a new softness. He spoke of my coolness and courage, of the true, brave heart I possessed. The words, uttered with such sincerity, such almost breathless reverence, made my own heart beat an unfamiliar rhythm. His gratitude was not expressed with flowery phrases, but with a gaze that lingered, a low tone that softened as he spoke to me, conveying an intimacy that was entirely new, entirely startling. As he dismissed me, urging me to secrecy, his final words, "Good night, my Jane," hung in the air, a whisper that was both a blessing and a claim. He did not say "Good night, Miss Eyre," but "my Jane." The subtle shift in address, the almost possessive tenderness of the phrase, ignited a spark of confusion, of apprehension, but also, undeniably, a thrill within me. Walking back to my room, the damp smell of smoke still clinging to my clothes, my mind reeled. The mystery of the fire's origin remained unsolved, hidden behind Mr. Rochester's sudden evasiveness, his insistence on discretion. But a greater, more personal mystery had emerged in that smoke-filled room, the strange, potent connection that had ignited between us, an unspoken current that hummed between master and governess. It was a current charged with an undeniable, frightening possibility, a nascent emotion that felt both thrilling and dangerous. My world, once so clearly defined, had shifted on its axis, and I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that nothing between Mr. Rochester and me would ever be quite the same again. Chapter 7, Blanche Ingram, the foil. The grand chambers of Thornfield Hall, usually echoing with a quiet dignity, were now alive with a new, vibrant energy. The arrival of the house party guests had transformed the staid manor into a glittering stage, and from my humble vantage point, often relegated to the peripheries, I observed the spectacle unfold. It was a world I did not belong to, yet one I could not help but study with intense, almost clinical fascination. Amongst the assembly of society's finest, one figure shone with particular brilliance: Miss Blanche Ingram. Her entrance was not merely an arrival, it was an event. Tall, statuesque, with eyes that sparkled and a cascade of dark, glossy curls, she moved with an innate grace that spoke of generations of breeding and an absolute certainty of her own allure. Her gowns were masterpieces of fashion, her jewels gleamed, and her laughter, a clear, ringing sound, commanded attention across the drawing room. She was, by all conventional standards, a dazzling beauty, a woman perfectly suited to adorn the most aristocratic circles. As I sat quietly, perhaps in a dim corner, or perched on a low stool just outside the main circle of conversation, I became a silent chronicler of Miss Ingram's every gesture, every word. She held court effortlessly, surrounded by admirers, her wit quick and biting, though often at the expense of others. Her conversations were laced with references to fashionable society, extravagant balls, and the latest gossip, topics far removed from the earnest simplicity of my own life or the deep, often turbulent, undercurrents that defined Mr. Rochester. Her interactions with Mr. Rochester himself were particularly telling. She flirted with a practiced ease, engaging him in lively banter, her eyes sparkling with challenge and expectation. She would play the piano, performing elaborate, showy pieces with a flamboyant flourish, her gaze frequently darting to gauge his reaction. And Mr. Rochester, for his part, seemed to play along, responding with a certain gallant attention, his usual brooding intensity replaced by a lighter, more conventional charm. Yet, even as he leaned in, smiling at her witticisms, a subtle, almost imperceptible distance remained in his eyes. It was this subtle distance that became the key to my understanding. I saw through the polished veneer, through the dazzling smiles and the effortless grace, to the core of Miss Ingram's character. Her beauty was undeniable, a brilliant facade, but beneath it I perceived a hollow arrogance, a spirit devoid of true empathy or intellectual depth. She spoke of sentiment, but often with a sneer, of kindness, but only as a social performance. Her pronouncements were often sharp, delivered with a self-satisfied air, reflecting a supreme confidence in her own superiority and an equally supreme disregard for the feelings of those she considered beneath her. There was a cruel streak in her wit, a mercenary glint in her ambition, revealed in how eagerly she weighed the fortunes of potential suitors. In contrast, my own existence was one of quiet contemplation, of striving for inner rectitude and intellectual growth. I valued integrity above superficial charm, sincerity above social standing. I sought depth in conversation, honesty in feeling, and a true connection of mind and spirit. Miss Ingram, with her grand gestures and calculated allure, seemed to embody everything I was not, and indeed everything I subtly disdained in the pursuit of genuine human connection. Observing Mr. Rochester's interactions with her from my shadowed corner, a profound realization began to dawn upon me, a quiet conviction that settled deep within my heart. While he might entertain her, might even be momentarily dazzled by her exterior brilliance, he could never truly love her. It was simply impossible. Mr. Rochester, for all his eccentricities and dark moods, possessed a profound intellect, a searching spirit, and a passionate heart that yearned for substance, for truth, for a soul-deep connection. Blanche Ingram, with her superficiality and vapid ambitions, offered none of that. She could offer him a beautiful mistress, a socially advantageous wife, but never a true companion for his complex, often tormented spirit. I understood then that his game with her, his almost exaggerated attentiveness, was perhaps a ruse, a diversion, or even a form of self-punishment. He sought something more, something genuine and profound, something that Blanche Ingram's radiant but empty beauty could never provide. The stark contrast between her outward splendor and her inner barrenness served only to illuminate what was truly valuable, what truly mattered. And in that quiet observation, hidden in the shadows, a tiny unbidden spark of hope, audacious and terrifying, began to glow within my own solitary heart. Chapter 8. The gypsy woman, after a supper marked by a forced gaiety that only thinly veiled the undercurrents of the guests' boredom, Jane found herself summoned. The drawing room, now transformed into an impromptu stage, held a singular, enigmatic figure. It was the gypsy, an old woman cloaked in dark, voluminous fabric, her head shrouded by a hood that concealed all but a slivered, wizened face and eyes that glinted with an unsettling, almost predatory keenness. A hush fell as Jane, hesitant and inwardly reluctant, was ushered forward. The gypsy's voice, a deep resonant rumble that seemed to emanate from the very earth, broke the silence. "Come, child, let old Mother Bunce rid your fate." She grasped Jane's hand, her touch surprisingly firm and cool, then abruptly pulled back as if recoiling from an unseen force. "You are cold," she pronounced, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, cold as a stone, quiet as a tomb. "No love, no joy, no passion stirs within you." Jane's blood ran colder still, not from fear, but from a strange recognition that chafed at her composure. She felt a prickle of annoyance, a rising indignation at this false accusation, yet a tremor of something akin to unease also ran through her. How could this stranger, with her piercing gaze, touch upon the very core of Jane's guarded nature? The gypsy pressed further, her words now a relentless, probing whisper. "You claim no love, no fiery emotion, but there is fire beneath the ice, eh? A secret longing, a suppressed yearning. You are consumed by an absent thought, a distant wish, a hunger for what you dare not name." Jane felt a strange mix of affront and uncomfortable truth. The gypsy's pronouncements were not about future events, but an unsettlingly accurate dissection of her present emotional state, of her fierce internal battles and unexpressed passions. She vehemently denied the charges, striving to maintain her outward composure, but the gypsy merely cackled, her eyes narrowing. Then, a subtle shift occurred. The old woman suddenly stood taller, the stoop leaving her shoulders, her movements becoming less rustic, more familiar. There was a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in the ancient voice, and the glint in her eyes, though still sharp, now held a distinctly mischievous, knowing quality. Jane's suspicions, which had been slowly stirring, solidified into a certainty. Before her very eyes, the hooded cloak was thrown back, and there, no longer disguised by the artifice of age and costume, stood Mr. Rochester. His familiar features, now free of their theatrical embellishments, broke into a triumphant, almost boyish grin, and his deep, hearty laughter filled the room. And so, the charade was exposed. Mr. Rochester, the master of his domain, had orchestrated this elaborate theatrical spectacle. Was it mere playfulness, a harmless diversion for his guests and himself? On the surface, perhaps. A clever jest, a testament to his dramatic flair, and a means to enliven a dull evening. But beneath the veneer of amusement lay a deeper, more troubling current. This was not innocent fun, it was a calculated experiment, a deliberate act of emotional espionage. Rochester had used deception, a disguise, and the guise of mystical insight to probe Jane's innermost thoughts, to test the very core of her guarded emotions. He sought to strip away her defenses, to uncover feelings she herself barely acknowledged, let alone expressed. The power dynamics were stark and undeniable. He, the wealthy, influential employer; she, the dependent governess. He exploited this imbalance, compelling her into a vulnerable position where her privacy was invaded, her autonomy undermined, and her true feelings were put on display, not for her own benefit, but for his gratification and curiosity. It was emotional manipulation, dressed up in the elegant, if somewhat crude, garb of a parlor game. He desired to know her heart, but chose to breach its walls through artifice rather than honest inquiry. This act, while undeniably revealing Rochester's complex nature and his desperate search for genuine connection, also cast a long shadow, hinting at a pattern of behavior that would continue to challenge Jane's spirit and her trust in the man who fascinated and disturbed her in equal measure. Chapter 9. The Scream. And Mr. Mason. The night, usually a comforting blanket of silence over Thornfield, was violently rent apart by a shriek that tore through the very fabric of the manor. It was not a cry of human pain, but something wilder, more primal, a sound that seemed to originate from the deepest, darkest corners of a nightmare, curdling the blood in one's veins and stirring every latent fear. I sprang from my bed, heart hammering, convinced that the very walls of Thornfield were screaming. Almost instantly, Rochester was at my door, his face a mask of urgency and a strange, desperate evasion. He clutched a candle, its flame dancing wildly, casting grotesque shadows that seemed to writhe and mock the gravity of the situation. His voice, usually so commanding, was hushed, almost pleading, as he bade me rise, explaining only that there had been a little accident, and that I must assist him without question. The air was thick with unspoken horrors, the very scent of danger clinging to him. Up we went, the winding stairs of Thornfield growing colder, darker, and more silent with each step. The air grew heavy, pregnant with dread. My imagination, already inflamed by that unearthly scream, conjured specters in every recess. We reached the third story, a rarely visited domain, known to me only as the dwelling place of Grace Poole, whose strange, guttural laugh had often unnerved me. But tonight, a different kind of sound emanated from behind a particular door, a low, moaning sound punctuated by a rasping breath. Mr. Rochester produced a key, and we entered a room plunged into near darkness, save for the single candle he held. And there, slumped in a chair, was a man, pale, bloodied, his eyes wide with a terror that seemed to transcend the physical wound I now saw. Richard Mason, the quiet, almost spectral visitor from Jamaica, lay wounded, a crimson stain spreading across his white shirt, soaking his sleeve. The sight was horrific, a brutal intrusion into the semblance of order I had come to associate with Thornfield. Mr. Rochester quickly attended to him, but his movements were frantic, his whispers urgent, his gaze darting to a heavy, locked door in the corner of the room, as if expecting the very source of the horror to burst forth. My task was simple, yet utterly terrifying. I was to sit with this bleeding man, administer a cordial if he requested it, and above all, speak to no one, not to Mr. Rochester, not to Grace Poole, and certainly not to the man himself, unless it was absolutely necessary. He left me then, sealing me within that dimly lit room, with a stranger whose life was ebbing away, and the unspeakable horror that lay behind the locked door, now mere feet from my trembling form. The silence that followed Mr. Rochester's departure was profound, broken only by the injured man's shallow, ragged breaths and the slow, insidious drip of blood onto the floor, a rhythmic, dreadful metronome counting out the seconds of this impossible vigil. I watched him, my breath catching in my throat, noticing the strange, almost mesmerized look in his eyes. He shivered constantly, not from cold, but from a profound internal chill, a fear that had sunk into his very bones. His wound was a jagged gash, a deep bite mark on his arm, consistent with a struggle, but one far more savage than human hands alone could inflict. Once, in a whisper that seemed to belong to the very realm of the dead, he murmured, "She bit me, and she sucked my blood." Then, the chilling words that would echo in my mind long after, "She said she'd drain my heart." From behind the stout, locked door in the corner, sounds occasionally issued forth, a low growl, like an animal caged, followed by a scratching, insistent and disturbing. Then a guttural mumble, a fragmented, incomprehensible discourse that seemed to come from the very maw of madness. Each sound was a spike driven into my heart, confirming the impossible, chilling reality that a creature, a thing of unspeakable horror, lurked inches from us, a prisoner yet a predator, its presence a palpable malevolent force. What monstrosity could reside there, unleashed only to inflict such pain? The very thought sent a cold dread through me, wrapping itself around my heart. I dared not move, dared not breathe too loudly, convinced that any disturbance might rouse it, bring it to our door. This was not a human prisoner, but something other, something terrifyingly unhinged, its madness and fury contained only by a thick wooden panel. The hours crawled by with the agonizing slowness of a death watch. The moon began to set, yielding grudgingly to the first faint hints of dawn. The sounds from behind the door grew quieter, occasionally replaced by a low, mournful howl, more beast than human. And then, at last, Mr. Rochester returned, his face haggard, but with a strange relief in his eyes. He swiftly administered a powerful sedative to Mason, and with the aid of Gracepool, whose presence now seemed eerily mundane after the terrors of the night, the wounded man was spirited away, his departure shrouded in the same secrecy that had governed his arrival. Thornfield, on that dawn, stood revealed to me as a place of profound and terrifying secrets. The horror I had witnessed, the terror I had felt, the reality of that nameless thing on the third floor, forever altered my perception of its grand, imposing walls. The scream had not been a fluke, an isolated incident, but an echo of the unspeakable reality that festered at its heart. I had stood vigil with a bleeding man, but in truth, I had stood vigil with the very soul of Thornfield, laid bare in all its Gothic, terrible glory. Chapter 10 Return to Gateshead. Forgiveness. The summons came, chilling the quiet routine of my life at Thornfield, yet stirring within me a familiar ancient dread. Gateshead. My aunt, Mrs. Ridd, lay dying. The journey back was a passage not merely through miles, but through years, each landmark a ghost of memory. When I stepped once more across that hated threshold, the house, though grand, felt shrunken, its former tyrannical vibrancy replaced by the hush of illness, the somber perfume of impending death. Eliza, cold and ascetic, and Georgiana, petulant even in grief, moved like shadows. Then I was led to her room. There she lay, a spectral figure beneath the heavy drapes, her face gaunt, her once formidable features sharpened by suffering, her eyes, though glazed, still holding a flicker of that old, hard light. The sight of her, so diminished, disarmed me. The childhood hatred, so fierce and consuming, had long since faded into a distant echo. What I felt now was a strange, dispassionate pity, and a profound weariness for the unforgiven past that still bound us. I knelt beside her, my voice, I believe, steady. "Aunt Red," I began, "I am here. I wish you peace." I offered her my hand, a gesture of reconciliation, of an olive branch extended across the chasm of our history. It was a moment of profound personal truth for me. I had wrestled with the demons of my past, with the injustices inflicted upon my youth, and I had found my own peace not in vengeance, but in the quiet strength of forgiveness. I offered it freely, not for her sake alone, but for mine. But some spirits, it seems, cling to their resentments as fiercely as to life itself. Her gaze, though weak, still pierced me with an accustomed malice. Her voice, a rasping whisper, was laced with the bitterness that had been her constant companion. "I have not been a good woman," she confessed, not with remorse, but with a stark, cold acknowledgement of fact. And then, her words struck me like a blow, revealing the true depth of her cruelty. She spoke of a letter, years old, from my uncle Jane Eyre, who had sought me out, wishing to adopt me, to make me his heir. She had intercepted it, hidden it, deliberately severing my last link to a hopeful future, all to spite my very existence. The revelation was a searing confirmation of the malice I had always sensed. It explained so much, filled in the dark, missing pieces of my childhood. Yet, even this profound betrayal, unveiled at the precipice of her death, could not ignite the old fires of rage within me. My maturity, forged in the crucible of hardship and self-reliance, held firm. I understood that her bitterness was her own prison, and that my freedom lay in releasing the past, not in clutching its chains. She died soon after, carrying her unforgiveness with her. But I, Jane Eyre, was free. Free to mourn the lost possibility, yes, but free also to step into a future unburdened by the dark shadow of Gateshead. My journey of forgiveness, though unreciprocated, had brought me a profound and lasting peace. Chapter 11. The chestnut tree. The proposal. The air was thick with the scent of summer rain, heavy and expectant, mirroring the tumultuous storm brewing within Jane Eyre's own heart. Each step she took beside Mr. Rochester on that darkening path to the orchard felt like a deliberate march towards an inevitable, painful parting. Her resolution to leave Thornfield, born of a quiet dignity and a profound self-respect, had solidified, even as every fiber of her being cried out against it. Rochester, ever the master of veiled intentions, began to speak of a marriage, a future, but always with a twist, a suggestion of another woman, one who possessed the beauty and social standing Jane so evidently lacked. It was a cruel game he played, testing her, pushing her until her carefully constructed composure shattered, revealing the raw, unadorned truth of her spirit. Do you think, because I am poor, obscure, plain, and little, I am soulless and heartless? Her voice, though small, carried the force of a tempest. You think wrong. I have as much soul as you, and full as much heart. And if God had gifted me with some beauty and much wealth, I should have made it as hard for you to leave me, as it is now for me to leave you. I am not talking to you through the medium of custom, conventionalities, nor even of mortal flesh. It is my spirit that addresses your spirit, just as if both had passed through the grave, and we stood at God's feet, equal as we are. And there it was, the audacious, unyielding declaration of equality. It was not a plea for love, but a demand for recognition, a testament to her inherent worth. It was the moment Jane Eyre, the unassuming governess, stood taller than any duchess, richer than any heiress, purely by the force of her uncorrupted soul. In that instant, as the heavens opened and the first great drops of rain lashed down, Rochester ceased his tormenting charade. His words, when they came, were startling in their directness, their passionate conviction. Then, Jane, I will marry you. Stay with me, Jane. He did not offer her a position, nor charity, but a true partnership. He saw beyond her plain exterior, past the societal barriers, and recognized the boundless spirit she had just so eloquently unveiled. His proposal was not merely an offer of marriage, it was an affirmation of her very being, a surrender to the powerful, unconventional love that had blossomed between them. It was a proposal born not of social expectation or convenience, but of a deep, almost primal recognition of two kindred souls, finally acknowledging their indissoluble bond. He did not ask her to change, to conform, but to simply be with him, as she was, his equal. As Jane, reeling from the sudden, overwhelming reversal of her fate, finally whispered her tearful yes, a flash of blinding lightning rent the sky. A clap of thunder, deafening and immediate, followed. They stood beneath the ancient chestnut tree, its gnarled branches reaching heavenward, a silent witness to their momentous vows. But in that instant, the tree itself bore the brunt of the storm's fury. The lightning struck with terrifying precision, splitting the venerable trunk down the middle, tearing it violently in two, leaving a profound, gaping wound. The symbolism was stark, undeniable, and deeply unsettling. Here, two souls had found each other, declared their equality, and promised an eternal union. Yet, at the very moment of their binding, the emblem of their passion, the sturdy, enduring chestnut, was irrevocably cleaved. It foretold, with terrifying accuracy, that their path to happiness would not be smooth, that their union, though forged in the crucible of fierce, undeniable love, would be fractured, tested, and perhaps, for a time, rent asunder. It was a powerful, prophetic image, foreshadowing the trials and tribulations that lay ahead for Jane and Rochester, a testament to the fact that even the most profound connections can be vulnerable to the crushing forces of fate and circumstance. Their love was a bolt of lightning, undeniable and powerful, but its very intensity carried the potential for devastating disruption. Chapter 12. The veil and the wedding day the night before my wedding was not one of blissful anticipation, but a crucible of strange, disquieting premonitions. I had dismissed the earlier ominous storm as mere weather, yet as darkness fell, a different kind of tempest brewed within the very walls of Thornfield, and within my own soul. Sleep proved a fickle companion, granting only snatches plagued by restless dreams. Then, in the deep quiet of the house, a sudden dread descended. I was not alone. A presence, chilling and unseen, seemed to fill the room, pressing down upon the very air I breathed. My eyes, wide with a nameless terror, scanned the shadows, and there, by my bedside, a figure stood. Not a shadow, not a dream, but a substantial, grotesque form, clad in a white dress, a shroud-like garment. It was a woman, yet so terribly disfigured, so ghastly in its aspect, that it seemed to belong not to this world, but to some infernal realm. Her face, dark and swollen, was scarred with the marks of some terrible malady or frenzy, and her eyes, bloodshot and baleful, burned with a savage, animalistic fire. Coarse, dark hair, disheveled and matted, fell about her shoulders. This creature, more fiend than human, lifted my wedding veil, the very symbol of my innocent hopes, and tore it, deliberately, savagely, into two fragments. With a guttural, inhuman sound, a low growl that vibrated through the very floorboards, she then extinguished the single candle and vanished, leaving me plunged into utter darkness and a terror that rooted me to my bed. The morning light, when it finally arrived, did little to dispel the lingering horror, though Mr. Rochester, when I recounted the ordeal, dismissed it as a nightmare, attributing it to my overwrought nerves. I tried to believe him, but the torn veil, hidden away, whispered of a truth far more sinister. The wedding day dawned, bright and deceptively fair. We proceeded to the church, Mr. Rochester and I, accompanied by the meekest of witnesses, Adele and Mrs. Fairfax, our small party reflecting the isolated nature of our intended union. The ancient edifice, usually so quiet, seemed to hold its breath, hushed and solemn. The clergyman stood ready, his voice resonating with the gravitas of the sacred vows about to be exchanged. My heart, a tumultuous thing of both hope and lingering apprehension, pounded beneath my simple dress. Mr. Rochester, by my side, seemed outwardly calm, yet I sensed an underlying tension, a tightly coiled spring within him. The ceremony began. The words, ancient and binding, filled the air. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here together. My hand was in his, the ring, cold and heavy, lay waiting. Just as the clergyman reached the solemn question, if any of you know cause, or just impediment, why these two persons should not be joined together in holy matrimony, ye are to declare it. A voice, clear and distinct, rang out from the back of the small church. The marriage cannot go forward. Every head turned. A man, a stranger, stepped forward, his face serious, accompanied by a lawyer, Mr. Briggs, and with them another figure, more familiar to me than I wished to acknowledge, Mr. Mason, his face pale and spectral. Mr. Rochester's face, which had been impassive, now contorted into a mask of furious desperation. By what authority do you interpose? He demanded, his voice strained. The stranger, Mr. Briggs, produced documents. By the authority of the law, he stated. Edward Fairfax Rochester has a wife now living. The words struck me like a physical blow, shattering the fragile edifice of my world. A chill, more profound than any winter's frost, settled in my bones. There was a wife living. Rochester's furious denials, his attempts to dismiss the accusation, were met with calm, irrefutable evidence from Mr. Briggs. He held the certificate of marriage, attested to by Mr. Mason, Rochester's brother-in-law. There was no escape. The clergyman, bewildered and distressed, could not continue. The wedding was halted brutally, irrevocably. With a desperate, almost savage resolve, Mr. Rochester seized my arm. Come, he commanded, his voice raw. Come and see for yourself. The entire company, a silent, grim procession, followed us back to Thornfield. Up the winding stairs we went, a journey filled with an unbearable dread. Higher and higher, past my familiar floor, to the third story, to a remote, locked door I had never seen opened. He produced a key, massive and ancient, and with a terrible click and groan of rusty hinges, the door swung inward. The room within was bare and dark, but another door, strong and bolted, stood beyond it. This, too, he unlocked. This is my wife, he declared, his voice devoid of all hope, his face a picture of ravaged despair. And there she was, Bertha Mason, the same ghastly figure I had seen in my room the night before. She was not a woman, but a beast. Her features, once human, were now contorted into a perpetual grimace of madness. Her eyes, those same bloodshot orbs that had stared at me in the dark, rolled wildly, filled with a malevolent, unseeing fury. Her hair, long and dark, hung in matted ropes. She lunged with a guttural shriek at her keeper, a stout woman who restrained her. Her strength was monstrous, her movements wild and erratic. She was a maniac, a demoniac, a creature of pure, unbridled savagery. Mr. Rochester stood back, his arms crossed, a figure of profound misery. "That is my wife," he repeated, his voice hollow, broken. "And she is mad. My father married me to her for her fortune, knowing full well the taint in her blood. And I have kept her here, hidden away, these 10 years. The truth, monstrous and undeniable, lay before me. The nightmare, the torn veil, the strange occurrences, all coalesced into this horrifying reality. My hopes, my future, my love, lay shattered, consumed by the fiery madness of Bertha Mason. The veil had been torn, not by a demon of sleep, but by a living, breathing symbol of the lies and secrets that had poisoned everything." Chapter 13. The madwoman in the attic. The day that dawned so brightly, promising the culmination of my heart's deepest desires, shattered into 1,000 jagged fragments before the altar. Mr. Briggs' voice, stark and unyielding, peeled back the gilded facade of my happiness, exposing the terrible truth. Edward Rochester had a wife, and she lived, breathing and confined, within the very walls of Thornfield Hall. My world, once vibrant with the promise of love, plunged into a chilling, suffocating darkness. I stood, a statue of shock, as the damning evidence was laid bare. Then came the command, a grim invitation to witness the horror that had been meticulously concealed. With a dreadful, heavy tread, we ascended to the forbidden 3rd story, to the attic, where sanity itself seemed to rot. The room was dim, airless, reeking of neglect, and there she was. My eyes, refusing to believe, were forced to behold her. Clothed in white, a ghastly parody of a bride, she was less a woman and more a beast, a grotesque, distorted caricature of humanity. Her face was discolored, swollen, her eyes bloodshot, blazing with a terrifying, mindless fury. She looked like a goblin, a vampire, her movements jerky and unnatural. Her short, dark hair, wild and matted, framed a visage so utterly savage, so utterly alien, that it stole the breath from my lungs. She growled, a guttural sound torn from the depths of a tormented throat. With a sudden, horrifying lunge, she tore at my wedding veil, ripping it to shreds with claw-like hands, a maniacal cackle escaping her lips. When Rochester tried to restrain her, she writhed, lunged, and even attempted to bite him, her teeth bared in a primal snarl. I saw the raw, untamed madness in her gaze, a profound, irreversible abyss. She was Bertha Mason, Edward Fairfax Rochester's wife, and the stark reality of her existence was a thunderclap that extinguished every ember of hope in my soul. Later, in the quiet desolation of the garden, Rochester poured out his soul, a torrent of confession, justification, and desperate pleading. His face, usually so composed, was ravaged by anguish, his eyes haunted by years of torment. He spoke of his youth, his forced marriage to a woman of beauty but diseased lineage, of her swift descent into madness, a madness that devoured her mind and transformed her into the monster I had just witnessed. He painted a picture of a life chained to a savage, a secret shame that had consumed his every waking moment, forcing him to keep her hidden, a prisoner and a tormentor. He spoke of his search for solace, for a companion, a kindred spirit, and how he had found it, only to have it ripped away by this ancient, festering wound. Then came the plea, delivered with an intensity that burned through my very being. He begged me to stay not as his wife, for that was impossible, but as his mistress, his companion, his soulmate. He promised a life away from England, from societal judgment, a life lived for love alone, unbound by legalities that had already betrayed him. He painted vivid pictures of new lands, of sun-drenched freedom, of a passion that would defy all convention. He urged me to cast off the shackles of what he termed cold, conventional morality, to choose him, to choose our love, to choose a life of vibrant, forbidden happiness. The temptation was a living, breathing entity, coiling around my heart. My love for him, raw and aching, screamed for me to yield, to abandon all for the man who had ignited my spirit. But deeper within, a voice, clearer and stronger, spoke of self-respect, of dignity, of principles that could not be sacrificed, even for the most profound love. To stay would be to lose myself, to become a shadow, a complicit part of his deceit. And so, the horror of Bertha Mason and the tragedy of Edward Rochester intertwined, creating a complex web of moral agony. My heart ached for Rochester, for the bitter fate that had trapped him in such a dire circumstance, for the years of solitude and despair he had endured. I understood the desperation that had driven him to such a deceitful act, to seek happiness by any means necessary. Yet his deceit, his willingness to tarnish my own purity for his salvation, remained an indelible stain. And Bertha, the monstrous image she presented, the violent reality of her madness, was undeniably terrifying. But even amidst the terror, a chilling question arose. Was she not also a victim? A victim of an arranged marriage, of a mental illness that society had no means or will to understand, of a lifetime of brutal confinement that could only exacerbate her condition. Stripped of her humanity, locked away and forgotten, her very existence a testament to profound suffering. Her torment was not a choice, but a horrifying condition. The scene in the attic, though a moment of pure dread for me, was also the unfolding of her own excruciating reality. In that moment, the world ceased to be a simple dichotomy of good and evil. It became a vast, intricate tapestry woven with threads of pain, desperation, love, deceit, and madness, leaving me utterly alone to navigate its perilous, morally ambiguous landscape. Chapter 14. The Great Refusal. Flight. The air in Thornfield, once thick with the scent of roses and the promise of enduring love, now hung heavy with the ashes of betrayal and the chilling breath of a moral precipice. Jane stood at the edge, a chasm yawning between her heart's desperate yearning for Rochester and her soul's unyielding demand for integrity. The shattering revelation of Bertha Mason, the madwoman in the attic, had transformed the altar of matrimony into a scaffold of shame. To stay meant to become a kept woman, an illicit companion, a shadow in the grand house, forever diminished. To leave meant an unimaginable future, fraught with peril and loneliness, but preserving the inviolate core of her being. This was the crucible, the ultimate test. Passion, fiery and seductive, against the unwavering star of principle. And then, in the deepest chamber of her being, a voice, clear and unyielding, whispered, "I care for myself." It was not a selfish cry, but a declaration of fierce self-preservation. It was the profound understanding that her own dignity, her sense of right, her soul's very health, was paramount. To surrender to Rochester's impassioned plea, to accept the gilded cage of his love under such terms, would be to betray not just society's laws, but her own conscience, her own God. It would be to lose herself, Jane Eyre, utterly and irrevocably. Better to be a beggar, a wanderer, a corpse even, than a fallen woman, stripped of her self-respect, a constant reminder of a moral compromise. That small, resolute voice, born of anguish and conviction, was the bedrock upon which she would rebuild, even if it meant tearing down everything familiar. Under the cloak of the new day's earliest, darkest hours, Jane moved like a phantom through the sleeping house. Her few coins, her small bundle containing the sparsest necessities, were all she possessed. Each floorboard creaked a protest under her light tread, each shadow seemed to hold its breath. The vast silence of Thornfield, usually comforting, now felt like a watchful presence, judging her flight. She paused, one hand on the cold doorknob, casting a final, lingering look at the closed door of Rochester's room. A silent farewell to a love that had promised so much and delivered so much pain. Then, with a wrench of her heart, she opened the door to the cold, moonless night and slipped out, leaving behind the only home she had known, a ghost fleeing a memory. The garden gate creaked shut behind her, a final hollow clang of severance. The carriage ride, brief and brutal, deposited her on a desolate crossroads as dawn began to paint the sky with icy fingers of light. Then came the more vast, indifferent expanse of heather and rock, stretching to a horizon that offered no promise, only more emptiness. The few shillings she possessed quickly dwindled, spent on sparse bread and harder lodging in obscure villages. Soon, even those meager comforts vanished. Days bled into weeks, each step a testament to a fading will. Hunger gnawed at her, a constant, dull ache that overshadowed all other thoughts. Thirst became a torment, her throat parched, her lips cracked. Her thin clothing offered little protection against the biting winds and the relentless rain. Exhaustion became her closest companion, each limb heavy, each breath a struggle. Her shoes wore through, her feet bruised and bleeding, tracing a path of pure desperation across the harsh terrain. Emotionally, the landscape mirrored her soul. Loneliness, a crushing weight, pressed down upon her. She was utterly alone, adrift in a world that seemed to have no place for her. Doubt, a venomous serpent, began to whisper its insidious questions. Had she made the right choice? Had her principles demanded too great a sacrifice? Yet, each time, the image of what she would have become, Rochester's mistress, degraded and shamed, solidified her resolve. She was broken, destitute, humiliated, but she was free, though freedom felt like a slow, agonizing death. Her spirit, though battered and bruised, held on by a thread, a tiny, flickering flame in the vast, consuming darkness of the moor. Chapter 15. Moorhouse and the rivers. I was a wanderer, a beggar, a wretch upon the face of the earth, colder than the stones I trod, hungrier than the beasts that scavenged. Exhaustion, privation, and despair had brought me to the very threshold of death. My strength gave out, my sight failed, and I sank down, conscious only of a faint light, a distant murmur of voices, and the crushing weight of the cold, against the very door of a house. A voice, stern and grave, spoke from within. "Who is there?" Then softer, more compassionate tones followed. "Let us open, St. John, it is a piteous cry." And another, gentle as a sigh, perhaps some poor creature perishing in the storm. The door opened. I recall a blur of light, the warmth of a hearth, and 3 figures silhouetted against it. The tall, fair man, St. John, stood impassive, but his 2 sisters, Diana and Mary, knelt beside me, their hands ministering, their voices soothing. They lifted me, a skeletal burden, into their home Morehouse. I remember little else of that night, save the blessing of warmth, a sip of water, and the profound, healing oblivion of sleep. My recovery was slow, a gradual reawakening from the very brink. For days I lay weak and silent, nursed with a tenderness I had long forgotten, a kindness that shamed my bitter heart. Diana and Mary Rivers were women of refined minds and generous spirits. They read to me, conversed with me, their presence a gentle balm. St. John, their brother, was a more complex figure, grave, intellectual, driven by a powerful, almost zealous, sense of duty, yet with an undercurrent of reserve that bordered on coldness. He observed me with an inscrutable gaze, though his actions were always just. As my strength returned, I spun a cautious tale, inventing the name Jane Elliott, and omitting all that might connect me to Thornfield. The Rivers, though discerning, pressed no further than my scant disclosures. One morning, St. John laid before me a new path. The village school at Morton required a mistress, a humble but honorable post. I accepted with eager gratitude. Life at Morton was simple, even austere, but it brought a profound sense of peace. I lived in a small cottage, taught the village children their letters and sums, and found contentment in honest labor and the quiet companionship of my newfound friends, Diana and Mary. Whenever they were home from their governess posts, I studied with them, shared their intellectual pursuits, and grew to love them as sisters, though a chasm of identity still separated us. St. John, meanwhile, pursued his spiritual calling, his intensity a quiet, constant force in the house. Then came the day that shattered my carefully constructed anonymity and revealed the astonishing truth. Diana and Mary were preparing to depart again, and St. John, recently returned from a journey, sat by the fire, a letter in his hand. He looked up, his blue eyes fixed upon me, not with their usual distant regard, but with a strange, piercing intensity. "There is a name in this letter," he began, his voice deliberate, "which I think is known to you. I find it in a solicitor's communication, relative to the death of a Mr. Eyre, a gentleman who resided in Madeira. His will mentions a niece, who by report has lately left her situation at Thornfield Hall. The name is Jane Eyre." My heart stopped. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was as if a ghost had been called forth. John watched my reaction, a flicker of comprehension in his usually composed features. He continued, holding up the letter. "This Mr. Eyre was my uncle. He has died and, having no children of his own, has bequeathed his entire fortune to his niece, Miss Jane Eyre. The sum is £20,000. £20,000. The enormity of it almost overwhelmed me, but a greater shock was yet to come. And that," St. John concluded, his gaze steady, "makes you, Jane Eyre, not merely my uncle's heiress, but our cousin. You are our mother's brother's child. We are family." The words struck me like a physical blow, yet they brought with them a rush of emotion, not of pain, but of overwhelming, unbelievable joy. My lost family found, not just 2 sisters and a brother, but a fortune that erased the need for charity, ensuring my independence and, more importantly, allowing me to share this immense gift with those who had saved me. The world had turned upside down, but in its inversion, it had righted a profound wrong, bestowing upon me, the friendless orphan, both kin and consequence. I had found not just a home, but a belonging richer than any treasure. Chapter 16. St. John Rivers. The cold fire. The air in Morton was still, clean, and bracing, a stark contrast to the often oppressive, charged atmosphere of Thornfield. Yet, within this apparent calm, Jane Eyre found herself grappling with a different kind of intensity, a challenge not of passionate turbulence, but of chilling, relentless will. She had fled the inferno of a morally compromised love, only to find herself confronted by a different kind of elemental force. St. John Rivers, the very embodiment of a cold fire. Where Rochester was all-consuming flame, volatile, demanding, and flawed, but undeniably human in his searing passion, St. John was glacial. He possessed an icy, pure brilliance, a diamond-like intellect honed to a razor's edge, but utterly devoid of human warmth. His features, though handsome, were cast in a rigid mold, his eyes a pale unblinking blue, reflecting light rather than emitting it. He moved with a quiet, austere grace, every gesture purposeful, every word measured. He was a man utterly master of himself, and sought to be master of all he surveyed, not through worldly power, but through an almost terrifying spiritual ambition. This ambition was the bedrock of his being, a relentless, singular drive to serve God, not with joyful devotion or tender mercy, but with a fierce, unyielding sense of duty. He saw the world, and indeed all human relationships, through the lens of this grand, consuming mission. Love, affection, personal comfort, the small joys and sorrows that color human existence, these were, to St. John, mere distractions, trivialities to be pruned away, endured, or exploited in the service of a higher, divine purpose. He could inspire awe, even admiration, for his unwavering dedication, but he could never inspire affection, for he seemed incapable of offering it himself. He spoke of duty, of sacrifice, of the souls he yearned to save in distant lands, but never of a single heart he truly held dear. His kindness was intellectual, his concern theoretical. He lacked utterly the tender touch, the spontaneous gesture, the shared laugh or tear that binds one soul to another. Jane, initially drawn by his piety and their shared intellectual pursuits, soon began to feel the chilling draft of his emotional vacancy. She admired his strength, but recoiled from its inhumanity. It was amidst this growing understanding that St. John made his proposal. It came not as a confession of love, a vulnerable plea for companionship, or an outpouring of personal feeling, but as a pronouncement, a strategic maneuver in his grand campaign. He laid out his reasons with chilling precision. He was bound for India. A missionary's life awaited him, and he needed a wife, a helpmeet, a fellow laborer. Jane possessed the intelligence, the fortitude, the self-discipline, and the grasp of native languages necessary for such a demanding role. She was, in short, perfectly suited to be his assistant, his instrument, his shadow. He spoke of India's scorching sun, of the arduous work, of the sacrifices required, and of the glory of God. He spoke of everything except love. He offered no tenderness, no promise of shared intimacy, no vision of a life lived side by side as equals in heart and soul. He offered a life of duty, consecrated to a remote God, and to his own unbending will. The words, though cloaked in religious fervor, struck Jane's spirit like an icy blade. She understood, with a clarity that brought a profound dread, that to marry St. John Rivers would be to commit a slow, deliberate suicide of the soul. Her passionate nature, her deep need for emotional connection, her vibrant inner life, all would be starved, smothered, and finally extinguished under the weight of his implacable resolve. She would be an adjunct, a tool, her identity swallowed whole by his. The thought of it was more terrifying than any physical danger, more desolate than any solitary existence. To live bound to a man who saw her only as a means to an end, whose heart was a frozen landscape where her own fire could never find purchase, would be a living death. Rochester, with all his flaws, had desired her wholly, fiercely, for herself. He saw her, loved her, and even when misguided, sought to possess her with a burning, human need. St. John, by contrast, saw not Jane, but a vessel, a suitable adjunct to his grand spiritual enterprise. His proposal was an invitation to immolation, not by fire, but by ice, a slow, agonizing extinction of all that made Jane Eyre truly Jane. And she knew, with an absolute certainty, that her spirit, forged in adversity and yearning for genuine connection, could not survive such a chilling fate. Chapter 17, The Voice in the Wind. And so, I found myself standing on the precipice of a decision that felt less like a choice and more like a surrender to a destiny meticulously crafted by another's unwavering will. St. John Rivers, with his ascetic purity and chilling zeal, had woven a web of duty, of sacrifice, and of a higher calling so compelling, so logically irrefutable, that my spirit, weary from wanderings and bruised by past betrayals, felt utterly disarmed. His arguments, delivered with a quiet intensity that was more potent than any shout, resonated with an intellectual grandeur, painting a future of purpose, of self-denial for the greater good, a life of profound utility. He spoke not of love, for he had none to offer in that earthly sense, but of companionship in a sacred mission, of a bond forged in shared hardship and spiritual aspiration. And I, battered by the storms of passion, perhaps mistaking the absence of turmoil for peace, felt my resolve weakening, my independent spirit, usually so fierce, beginning to bow under the weight of his conviction. He made it seem selfish to seek personal happiness, trivial to yearn for a love that warmed the heart. when a world lay waiting for salvation. I was almost convinced, almost ready to forsake the desires of my own soul, to silence the whispers of my heart, and pledge myself to a path dictated by cold reason and religious obligation. The words of acceptance, though unspoken, trembled on my lips, ready to seal my fate to a life of arduous, loveless duty. My mind, almost subjugated, wrestled with the last vestiges of my true self, struggling to articulate a protest against the cold, hard logic that threatened to consume me. Then, piercing through the quiet evening air, slicing through the very fabric of my almost resignation, came a voice. Not a physical sound from the room, not a whisper from the window, but a clear, distinct, preternatural call that reverberated through my very being, striking an immediate chord of recognition and an urgency that defied all reason. It was an articulate appeal, carried not by the wind, but seemingly asterisk on asterisk the wind, from an unimaginable distance. "Jane! Jane! Jane!" It came to me as if borne on the wings of a spirit, a cry of yearning, of desperation, of an undeniable, primal connection that transcended space and time. It was Mr. Rochester's voice, unmistakable, potent, imbued with all the familiar torment and passion I knew so well. It was a voice from a soul reaching out, traversing mountains and valleys, defying the impossible to find me. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. My spirit, which had been on the brink of yielding to St. John's austere philosophy, recoiled as if from a physical blow, then soared with a fierce, untamed joy. How could I have ever contemplated a life without that voice, without that vibrant connection, that deeply human, deeply flawed, yet profoundly loving spirit? In that single, miraculous moment, the path St. John offered, however noble in its outward appearance, revealed itself for what it truly was for me: a barren, loveless existence. I saw with startling clarity that while duty might sustain the body, only love could nourish the soul. To commit to a life devoid of genuine affection, to pledge my hand without my heart, would be a betrayal of every fiber of my being, a desolate existence that, for me, was far worse than any solitude. The supernatural summons had not merely recalled me to a person, but to myself, reminding me that while I could serve God with my mind and my deeds, my heart belonged to where it truly lived, not to a cold, intellectual alliance. The call in the wind was a profound affirmation that love, messy and imperfect as it might be, was the only foundation upon which I could ever build a life of truth and profound happiness. My rejection of duty without love was thus sealed, not by choice, but by the undeniable, echoing truth that had shattered the silence of my almost surrender. Chapter 18. Ferndian. The reunion. My heart, a compass spinning wildly, had guided me back. After a year of wandering, of trying to build a new life, the inexorable pull of memory and affection proved too strong to resist. I had to know, I had to see. So, I journeyed, retracing the path to Thornfield Hall, my spirit a tumult of hope and trepidation. But the familiar silhouette against the horizon was gone. As I approached, a profound silence, more chilling than any storm, enveloped the scene. Where once a grand house had stood, vibrant with life, now lay a gaunt skeleton of blackened stone, open to the sky like a shattered skull. The once elegant parapets were crumbled, the stately battlements scarred by fire. A gaping breach marked the spot where the third story had collapsed, revealing the twisted innards of what had been a splendid dwelling. Grass grew defiantly amongst the charred debris, and ivy, oblivious, continued its slow creep over the ruined walls. It was Thornfield, yet it was not. It was a tomb, a stark monument to a forgotten past. A kind innkeeper in the nearby village, seeing my distress, recounted the tale. It was Bertha Mason, the madwoman, who had finally wrought the destruction she had so often threatened. One night, while the house slept, she had set fire to her chamber, then scaled the roof, a fiery torch in her hand. Uttering dreadful yells, Mr. Rochester, roused from his sleep, had valiantly attempted to rescue his servants, and then, with a courage born of desperation, tried to save his deranged wife from the inferno she had created. He succeeded in getting his servants to safety, but Bertha, defiant to the last, plunged from the burning roof to her death. In his heroic, selfless effort to save her, the collapsing timbers had struck him down. He was pulled from the wreckage, but not before the fire had claimed his sight and one of his hands. He was now, the innkeeper informed me, a broken man, living in a secluded lodge called Ferndian, deep within the woods, attended only by an old couple, Ferndian. The name resonated with isolation, with the sorrowful echo of a wounded spirit. My decision was instant, unwavering. I would find him. The path to Ferndian was winding, narrow, and overgrown, leading deeper and deeper into a primal forest, as if nature itself conspired to conceal his solitude. And then, through the dense foliage, I saw it a small, gray stone house, humble and withdrawn, a stark contrast to the Thornfield of old. My heart thrummed against my ribs as I approached the door. A maidservant, Mary, admitted me. And there he was, my Rochester. He was seated by the hearth, not in his usual commanding posture, but slumped, his head bowed. His once powerful frame was leaner, his movements tentative, and his eyes. My gaze fell upon them, those magnificent, piercing eyes that had once held me captive with their intelligence and fire. Now, they were vacant, sightless, clouded by the tragedy that had befallen him. One arm, the strong, capable arm that had held me close, was gone, replaced by an empty sleeve. He was maimed, disfigured, dependent, a shadow of the man I had loved and left. A wave of profound pity, laced with a fierce, protective love, washed over me. The pain of seeing him thus was sharp, but deeper still was the overwhelming certainty that I belonged here, now, more than ever. He spoke, his voice rough with disuse and despair, questioning Mary. I answered instead, my voice a whisper, yet clear enough to penetrate the gloom of his world. Edward, it is Jane Eyre. He started, disbelieving, his blind face turning towards the sound of my voice. His questions came in a torrent, a desperate plea for confirmation. His hands, searching, found my face, tracing my features, verifying my presence through touch. In that touch, in his profound vulnerability, I saw not a fallen idol, but a man stripped bare of all artifice, all pride, all the power he had once wielded. The past chasm between us, the one rooted in his wealth, his position, his secrets, and my dependence, had been utterly destroyed by the very fire that claimed his sight. He was no longer the master, testing his governess with veiled intentions and subtle manipulation. I was no longer the penniless orphan girl, grateful for a roof over my head. I had returned an independent woman, with a small fortune of my own, my spirit strengthened by trials, my moral compass unyielding. He needed me now, not for my beauty, not for my youth, but for my very being. I was his eyes, his hand, his connection to a world he could no longer perceive. And in this reversal, in his utter reliance on me, we found a truer, deeper equality. Our love, once fraught with imbalance and hidden truths, was now purified, forged in the crucible of shared suffering and mutual need. We stood on level ground, two souls scarred by life, but finally free to meet as equals, bound by an unbreakable, unselfish devotion. It was no longer a matter of master and servant, but of two human beings, perfectly matched, perfectly necessary to each other's existence. He was broken, and I was whole, and together we were complete. Chapter 19, reader. I married him, reader, and so we arrive at a destination, a quiet harbor after a tempestuous voyage. Reader, I married him. These 5 words, so simple, so direct, yet resonating with such profound weight, are not merely a statement of fact, but a declaration of triumph. They stand as a testament to a spirit unbroken, a will undeterred, and a heart finally, unequivocally, fulfilled. It is Jane's voice, clear and unburdened, reaching out across the ages, cutting through the expectations of her time, and offering a resolution entirely her own. No longer the timid governess, no longer the penniless wanderer, she takes ownership of her destiny, sealing it with a phrase that is both intimate confession and bold assertion. It is the ultimate statement of agency, a testament to her steadfast belief in love, integrity, and self-worth, a culmination of every trial and every quiet victory. Our story concludes not with lavish celebrations or grand pronouncements, but within the secluded, almost forgotten walls of Ferndean. It is a home that mirrors the journey itself, scarred, remote, yet capable of profound restoration. Here, away from the judgmental gaze of society, away from the lingering shadows of Thornfield's past, Jane and Rochester build their new life. Rochester, still bearing the physical marks of the fire, found in Jane not a nurse or a burden bearer, but a partner, a companion, his very eyes and hands in a world that had become an impenetrable darkness. She was his guide through the forest paths, his reader by the hearth, the steady pulse of life in his renewed existence. And then, a miracle. Slowly, gradually, the faintest glimmer of light pierced the perpetual night of his blindness. First, the perception of a shadow, then the distinct outline of a face, her face, beloved and familiar. And later, the ultimate blessing, the ability to gaze upon the innocent features of their child, their son, a living symbol of their future, a true union of their separate selves. It was a partial restoration, yes, but enough. Enough to see the love reflected in Jane's eyes, enough to recognize the world unfolding around him, enough to hold his child and know profound gratitude. Their life was quiet, imbued with the deep peace that only true companionship can bring, a testament to love's ability to heal even the most grievous wounds. And what then of the definition of a happy ending? Is it perfection, freedom from all hardship? Perhaps not. For Jane, happiness is not found in an idealized fantasy, but in a profound and balanced interdependence. She marries Rochester not out of necessity, but out of an unshakable love, a love now free from the taint of deceit and the imbalance of power. Her own inheritance has given her the financial independence she always craved, ensuring she enters this union as an equal, not as a subordinate. Rochester's vulnerability, far from diminishing him in her eyes, creates an equilibrium that Thornfield never knew. He relies on her, yes, but she also freely chooses to provide that support. Their bond is forged in mutual need and mutual devotion. Jane retains her fierce independence of spirit, her intellectual clarity, her moral compass, yet she pours her entire being into their shared life. Their happiness is not a static state, but a dynamic, living entity, nurtured by daily affection, understanding, and the quiet joy of a love that has been tested by fire and emerged, purified and stronger than ever before. It is a testament to the truth that true love thrives not on absolute self-sufficiency, but on the profound, chosen strength of two souls interwoven, each finding their greatest fulfillment in the embrace of the other. Their story concludes not with an end, but with the beginning of a life lived fully, honestly, and in perfect harmony. We have journeyed through Jane Eyre's triumphs and trials. Now, dear listener, channel her spirit. This 7-day action plan applies Brontë's philosophy to your modern life, transforming introspection into tangible action. Prepare for a week of profound self-discovery and empowerment. Day 1 and 2. Audit your relationships. Jane consistently sought equality and respect. From the cruel Reeds to the complex Rochester and the austere St. John, her compass was always her self-worth. For these first 2 days, conduct an unflinching audit of your relationships. Do they elevate your spirit or diminish it? Do you feel truly heard, respected, and seen by friends, family, partners, colleagues? Are your connections built on mutual esteem, where both voices carry equal weight? Are you consistently giving more than you receive? Do you suppress your true self to maintain harmony? Jane knew true connection never demands the sacrifice of your soul. Acknowledge where boundaries need setting or conversations initiated for greater balance. This honest assessment is the bedrock of self-respect. Day 3 and 4 practice saying no. Few embody unshakable integrity like Jane. Her profound agency stemmed from a resolute refusal to compromise. Remember her agonizing decision to leave Thornfield, rejecting passionate love rather than living a life of deceit. Or her steadfast refusal to marry St. John, for a union devoid of love. For the next 48 hours, challenge yourself to say no to things that compromise your integrity, your peace, or your authentic self. This safeguards your precious internal landscape. Perhaps it's declining an invitation you dread, or refusing an extra task that stretches you beyond limits. Perhaps it's speaking up, politely but firmly, when a comment makes you uncomfortable. Jane taught us that no is an affirmation of self, a declaration of your worth, a testament to your values. Start small. Feel the liberation that comes with aligning your actions with your convictions. Those who truly respect you will respect your boundaries. This act of self-preservation is a cornerstone of inner strength. Day 5, 6, and 7 engage in intellectual exercise. Despite humble beginnings, Jane possessed formidable intellect and insatiable curiosity. She found solace and strength in books, drawing and observing the world, constantly broadening her understanding. Her mind was her sanctuary, a source of resilience and perspective. For the remaining 3 days, dedicate yourself to intellectual exercise. This encompasses any activity that challenges your mind, expands your horizons, and cultivates new skills. Perhaps it's learning a new language for an hour daily, or delving into a challenging philosophical text. It could be mastering a complex recipe, understanding a new technological concept, or a creative pursuit like drawing or writing. The goal is not perfection, but engagement. Immerse yourself in something demanding mental effort, pushing you beyond your comfort zone. Let your mind stretch, discover new capacities. Feel the satisfaction of grappling with complexity, acquiring new knowledge, seeing the world freshly. This pursuit of intellectual growth, like Jane's, is powerful self-empowerment. It cultivates an inner world so rich and vibrant no external circumstance can diminish it. It equips you with discernment, adaptability, and profound self-possession. By embracing these 7 days auditing relationships, practicing the courageous no, and diligently engaging in intellectual exercise, you embody Jane Eyre's spirit. You forge your own path to a life of integrity, authenticity, and profound self-worth. Let her story be a blueprint for living. Welcome back, fellow travelers on the winding path of literature, as we arrive at the threshold of reflection. We have journeyed through the vivid landscapes of Jane Eyre's remarkable life, witnessing her triumphs, her trials, and the unwavering strength of her spirit. Now, as the final echoes of her autobiography gently fade, let us distill the rich tapestry of her experiences into 3 enduring pillars, 3 profound takeaways that illuminate not just her world, but our own. Our first pillar, unshakable and brightly burnished, is this: self-worth is non-negotiable, regardless of status. From the cold, inhospitable corridors of Gateshead Hall, where she was dismissed as less than nothing, to the austere walls of Lowood, where deprivation sought to crush her spirit, Jane steadfastly refused to surrender her intrinsic value. She was an orphan, a governess, lacking beauty and social standing, yet she possessed an inner dignity that no insult could diminish, no circumstance could extinguish. We saw her confront the cruel Mrs. Reed, stand her ground against the tyrannical Mr. Brocklehurst, and even challenge Mr. Rochester, the master of Thornfield, demanding recognition not for her position, but for her mind, her heart, and her very being. Jane teaches us that true worth springs not from external validation, not from wealth or lineage or fleeting beauty, but from the unyielding conviction of one's own soul. It is a birthright, an inherent light that must be fiercely protected and never, under any circumstance, compromised. This leads us directly to our second profound realization: true love requires equality of mind and spirit. Jane's journey into the heart of love with Mr. Rochester was fraught with complexities, a dance between passion and propriety, master and governess. In the initial stages, an undeniable imbalance existed: he, the worldly, wealthy landowner; she, the humble, dependent governess. Yet, it was in their intellectual sparring, their deep, soul-bearing conversations, that their spirits truly met. Jane never allowed herself to be merely an ornament or a convenient companion. She demanded to be seen, heard, and respected as an intellectual equal, a spiritual counterpart. The profound truth of their bond only solidified when the external trappings of status were stripped away, when Rochester was humbled, and Jane found her own independence. Their eventual union, then, was not a melding of disparate halves, but a coming together of 2 whole, equally powerful souls. This is the very essence of enduring love, a partnership built on mutual respect, shared intellect, and an unwavering belief in the other's fundamental worth. And finally, we arrive at the third, perhaps most pivotal, pillar of Jane Eyre's legacy: morality is doing the right thing when no one is watching. This principle shines brightest in Jane's most challenging moments. Consider her agonizing decision to flee Thornfield upon discovering Mr. Rochester's hidden wife. There she stood, on the precipice of comfort, love, and social acceptance, yet her profound moral compass compelled her to abandon it all. No one would have known her secret, no one would have judged her for remaining in a life of luxury as a mistress. But Jane's conscience, her unwavering adherence to what was right, regardless of personal cost or public scrutiny, guided her steps into destitution and uncertainty. Similarly, her refusal of St. John Rivers' proposal, despite the promise of a respectable life and missionary purpose, stemmed from an internal conviction that her heart could not assent to a union devoid of true love. These were not choices made for accolades or fear of reprimand, but born from an internal code of ethics, a profound integrity that defined her character. Jane Eyre reminds us that true virtue is not performative. It is the quiet, steadfast commitment to righteousness in the deepest chambers of one's own heart. These 3 pillars, the non-negotiability of self-worth, the necessity of equality in true love, and the profound essence of private morality, stand as timeless testaments to Charlotte Brontë's genius and Jane Eyre's enduring spirit. They are not merely observations on a fictional life, but powerful directives for our own, guiding us to live with authenticity, love with intention, and act with unassailable integrity. Jane Eyre's journey, ultimately, is a testament to the power of the individual spirit to triumph over adversity, not by external force, but by the quiet, resolute strength of its own truth. We have journeyed together through the intricate landscapes of Jane Eyre's extraordinary life, witnessing her unwavering spirit, her steadfast refusal to be anything less than her true self, even when the world conspired against her. Her choices, stark and profoundly personal, have resonated within us, compelling us to look inward and ask, what would I do? So, I put it to you, dear listener, as we close this chapter on Jane's remarkable autobiography. Have you ever found yourself at such a crossroads, where the deep longing of the heart pulls you in one direction, promising solace and belonging, yet your most sacred principles, your very sense of self, demands another, perhaps lonelier path? Think of Jane, standing firm against Mr. Rochester's impassioned plea, or later, resisting St. John Rivers's cold, calculated demand for her unreserved devotion. She chose integrity over comfort, self-respect over a compromised love. What inner battles have you fought that echo hers? I invite you to reflect, to share your own Red Room moments, those times when your conviction was tested. This is where stories truly come alive, isn't it? When they cease to be mere narratives and become mirrors reflecting our own complex truths, inviting us to ponder our own ethical landscapes. If this intimate exploration of Jane Eyre's world has resonated deeply within you, if it has stirred your own thoughts and feelings, and if you crave more such immersive journeys into the profound depths of literature, then I extend a heartfelt invitation to join our growing community of fellow literary enthusiasts. A simple gesture, a click to like this chapter, is a powerful signal. It helps others, just like you, discover these rich discussions and insights. And by subscribing, you ensure you never miss a beat, as we continue to unlock the timeless wisdom and emotional power hidden within classic tales. We're not just analyzing books here, we are building a vibrant space for those who believe that stories are not merely entertainment, but essential pathways to understanding ourselves, our history, and the intricate tapestry of human experience. Your engagement fuels these explorations, making this journey all the richer. And what illuminating path shall we tread together next? Having delved into the quiet yet monumental defiance of Jane Eyre, her struggle for identity and moral autonomy, our next literary venture will transport us to a world equally rich in ambition, societal critique, and an unforgettable personal odyssey through the often treacherous waters of Victorian morality and class. Prepare yourselves, for we shall soon embark on a meticulous dissection of Charles Dickens's unforgettable masterpiece, Great Expectations, a narrative equally profound in its character development, its searing social commentary, and the indelible mark of childhood experience shaping adult destiny. Stay tuned for another illuminating literary adventure, brimming with deep analysis and evocative storytelling, awaits you. Thank you for sharing this chapter and indeed, this entire journey with me. Until our next literary sojourn, keep reading, keep thinking, and above all, keep questioning the worlds within and around you.